I think it revealed two contrasting people and two contrasting vulnerabilities. Keir Starmer, I thought, was surprisingly diffident, almost in awe of the occasion, and that came across. Rishi Sunak was precisely the reverse, confident, I would say overconfident, in talking over Keir Starmer, which the audience hated. It also revealed their contrasting vulnerabilities. On the one hand, Rishi Sunak doesn't want to talk about the past and is scared to talk about the past. And on the other hand, Keir Starmer is still finding a problem defining the future.
Andrew Neil on Times Radio.
Well, it's early afternoon and the fallout is still continuing from last night's ITV debate. So I guess to that extent it can be deemed a success. Let's bring in a couple of people who've been through the mill on this sort of thing. Former government advisors, Jack Doyle, former Downing Street Communications Director to Boris Johnson, and the former spokesperson for Tony Blair, Tom Kelly. Welcome to you both. Tom's in the studio. Jack's just down the line. Tom, let me come to you first. What do you take away from last night's debate?
In some ways, I thought it was very predictable. In other ways, I think it revealed two contrasting people and two contrasting vulnerabilities. Keir Starmer, I thought, was surprisingly diffident, almost in awe of the occasion, and that came across. Rishi Sunak was precisely the reverse, confident, I would say overconfident, in talking over Keir Starmer, which the audience hated. It also revealed their contrasting vulnerabilities. On the one hand, Rishi Sunak doesn't want to talk about the past and is scared to talk about the past. And on the other hand, Keir Starmer is still finding a problem defining the future.
What it's going to be under him.
What it is going to be under him. And I think that's going to be interesting to see whether they and their teams can fill in those question marks in the next 4 weeks.
Jack, give us your initial take and then we'll drill down on it.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment. It felt to me like the first kind of clear day where the Conservatives have been on the front foot in this campaign. If you even just go back 48 hours, everyone was talking about Farage. He was nowhere to be seen, obviously, last night. It put the choice very squarely for the voter in terms of Sunak versus Starmer. And look, we're still talking about the line that Rishi delivered, which was the £2,000, which is, dominating this morning's coverage. So in CCHQ, they'll be considering this to be I think a pretty significant win for them. I think the other point, which, Tom touched upon, was Rishi managed to get the debate talking much more about the future and about what's coming. And that's more difficult for Starmer because he wants to have this discussion on 14 years of Conservative rule. So I thought there were quite a significant shift in the campaign last night that favoured the Conservatives.
But Jack, probably not sufficient enough to be a game changer.
Oh, absolutely not, Andrew. No, I think the one day of a win is a start, right? When you started the campaign with in the pouring rain, and a series of sort of missteps and some policies that haven't really landed well, then you're looking to just land a win, and they landed what felt like a win last night. The job for them now will be to keep the tax row going for as long as they possibly can, try and string a few days of wins together and keep making the point, probably in some new and different ways, about why they think Labour will put up taxes.
One of the reasons why this £2,000 figure has had legs, I would suggest, is that it was Keir Starmer was so slow to knock it down. And yet we now know that Labour had that letter from the Permanent Secretary to the Treasury saying that this isn't Treasury costings. This doesn't come with our primateur on it at all. If he had brought that up then, it may have knocked it down right away, but instead it's carried on. It is the story du jour.
I really don't understand why he didn't knock it down the first time that it was mentioned. I think partly Julie Aitchison said to him, well, we'll get to tax later. But he should have grabbed it then. You know, I was watching in London, my wife was watching back home in Northern Ireland, and I texted her immediately and said, he should have shut that down. And he didn't. And what's even more of a mystery is precisely, they had the letter. Imagine the theatre of him producing that letter out of his pocket and saying, here's a Treasury official who says it isn't independent, it isn't Treasury. That would have been, you know, the Tories took a hell of a risk doing that, because if he had produced that letter, it would have cut the legs off Rishi Sunak.
Jack, you said that yesterday the debate, the follow-on it's not been a great campaign for the Tories, but this was a success of one day. That they've done pretty well. They're calling the shots, even though there's some deep questioning over the validity of it all. How, given the mountain they have to climb to try and get back into this campaign, what lessons would you draw that where should they go from here?
That's a good question. I think they will hope that the £2,000 row continues for as long as they can make it, and then they will seek to build on it. There will be other policy areas or other commitments that they will want to explore. And I think if you look at how Rishi was starting to frame it in the debate, it wasn't just about the specific £2,000 off the basis of, you know, these, as you say, somewhat questionable sums. It was also about, he said, you know, if there's going to be a Labour government, you should start saving now. It's, you know, the cost of net zero on you as a family, the cost of, you know, the tax on your car and the taxes on your pension. So, you know, he's already looking for ways to broaden the attack. And I think, you know, looking at it from the other side, Starmer will be just very keen to get the subject onto, you know, home territory. I don't think they'll be too worried about the kind of, is it right? You know, did the civil servants cost it entirely? And you did very well to unpick Andrew Mitchell on that. I think they'll just be happy that in every other sentence that's being discussed on the news today, shades of the sort of 350 million, approach that people are talking about Labour and tax.
Putting aside the validity of the claim and the exact 2,000, which I've done my best to try and get some answers on here, perhaps the success of the Tory strategy is that there is a feeling at the back of people's mind, which is, look, Labour would inherit a very tight fiscal position. Labour governments exist to spend. They want to spend things that Labour voters, Labour people want to see more of. Mr. Blair did that after 97. I won't unravel Mrs. Thatcher, but I'm going to spend more on the schools and the hospitals that people use. So the extent that there are tax rises coming down the pike, but Labour's just not telling us about them, that has some resonance as a general proposition.
Yes, I think all the polls show that the public, frankly, don't believe either party on tax, and I think the public's right. I think where Labour have to get to is a position where they paint the picture of where they want the country to be in 10 years' time. They talk about a decade of national renewal. They have to paint the picture of what does that mean for housing? What does that mean for our social security system? What does that mean for defence? What does that mean for trade? And they have to paint that picture and say that they will get there in steps as the country can afford it. Modular policy making, if you like modular infrastructure. So you do it in steps, and they have to reassure people in that. Otherwise, if they don't address that, then they will leave it open to the Tories to say they're just going to spend willy-nilly. They have to show that they have learnt the lesson of Liz Truss.
It seems that sometimes it was one of the Times columnists said, Labour's position is everything's broken, but we're not going to do anything. We're not going to tell you about it. Let me go back to Jack as we come to the end here. Is it still, in your view, despite what you've said, that this debate seems to have gone Mr. Sunak's way, looking at the polls and the mood of the country, is it still pretty much mission impossible for the Conservatives?
Well, if it isn't mission impossible, it's very, very close to it, I think. But look, in every campaign, there's a kind of, I think I was at Levido's called it a narrow path, and I think it's narrow and shrinking, perhaps. I think, look, they are trying to make the best out of what is a very difficult situation, whichever poll you look at. I think they will be delighted, pleased with what's happened in the last 24 hours. They will be looking to build on it. I think they have got a mountain to climb, and I think they know that.